They told him the war was over. They told him this in a voice that carried no urgency, no weight, as if announcing the weather or the price of grain. The man who spoke did not look up from his desk. He slid a stamped paper across the counter, already turning toward the next task. The soldier did not pick it up. He stood there in his worn blue coat, the fabric faded almost to gray, the brass buttons dulled by years of handling. He had lost track of how long he had been wearing it, long enough that it felt less like clothing and more like skin. "Over," the clerk repeated, tapping the edge of the paper. "You're free to go." The soldier waited for something else, an instruction, a destination, a reason. None came. So he stepped back, folded the paper carefully, and walked out of the building without ever understanding that for everyone else in the country, the war had ended. For him, it never would. When the guns first spoke in 1861, America did not yet understand what it had agreed to endure. Men volunteered with clean hands and untested confidence. They believed wars were events, not conditions, something you entered, survived, and then exited with a story worth telling. The early letters home were full of optimism. Camps were uncomfortable but lively. Officers promised quick victories. Newspapers printed maps that made everything seem orderly. By the time the optimism drained away, the machinery of war was already too large to stop. This is not a story about generals whose names appear in textbooks, or battles commemorated with monuments. This is the story of a man whose name existed only as ink on forms, whose life was shaped not by heroism or cowardice, but by the quiet failure of a system that never noticed when he slipped through it. His name was Samuel Isaiah Crowley. He was born in 1839 in a low-lying stretch of land near the Ohio River, in a town small enough that everyone recognized everyone else by face, if not by name. His father repaired riverboats when work was steady, and trapped animals when it was not. His mother kept ledgers for the general store, tallying debts that were often paid late or never. From her, Samuel learned the power of writing things down. Ink made promises feel real. It made obligations survive memory. What was written could be enforced. What was forgotten might as well have never existed. Samuel was not an exceptional child. He was quiet, capable, and easily overlooked. Teachers praised his penmanship more than his ideas. Employers liked that he followed instructions without complaint. By the time he was 22, he had already learned that life rewarded those who did not attract attention. When the war began, he did not rush to enlist. He watched others do so. He listened to the speeches in the town square and the arguments in the tavern. He saw the excitement give way to unease as casualty lists lengthened. In the summer of 1862, the call came again, this time sharper, more desperate. The war was not ending, it was expanding. Draft notices appeared on doors. Samuel enlisted the day before his name could be pulled from a box. The enlistment office was crowded and disorganized. Clerks shouted names, men jostled each other in line. Forms were filled out quickly, often incorrectly. Samuel's information was recorded in a firm, confident hand. Name, age, place of birth, occupation. No one asked many questions. No one looked him in the eye for very long. He was assigned to the 74th Ohio Volunteer Infantry, Company D. He signed his name carefully. That signature would follow him longer than any living person ever would. The Army trained Samuel to exist within rules. Wake when told, eat when permitted, move when ordered, stand still when commanded. It suited him. The structure replaced choice. The repetition erased uncertainty. For the first time in his life, the expectations were clear and constant. He learned to march in lines that stretched beyond his sight. He learned to fire a rifle until the act became mechanical. He learned that bravery was often indistinguishable from exhaustion. His regiment saw its first major engagement at Shiloh. The battlefield did not resemble the illustrations in newspapers. There was no symmetry, no clarity. Smoke erased landmarks. Noise drowned out commands. Men fell without warning. Samuel fired when others fired. He reloaded when others reloaded. He stepped over bodies because there was nowhere else to step. When the fighting ended, the ground seemed to breathe. Shiloh taught him that survival was not a matter of skill or courage. It was placement, timing, luck. He survived, and so his name remained on the rolls. The Army moved on. So did the paperwork. The longer the war dragged on, the more the Army relied on documentation to impose order on chaos. Morning reports listed who was present, absent, sick, wounded, or dead. Muster rolls attempted to reconcile reality with expectation. Ledgers were kept, corrected, recopied. Samuel's name appeared again and again. He was never wounded badly enough to be hospitalized, never absent long enough to be questioned, never notable enough to be remembered. This, too, suited him. At Vicksburg, he helped dig trenches. At Chattanooga, he carried ammunition. During long marches, he walked in silence, counting steps, conserving breath. Men around him talked of home, of farms and shops and wives and sweethearts. Samuel listened but rarely contributed. His parents had died within a year of each other shortly before the war. There was no one waiting for him anywhere. The Army had become his only address. In 1864, as Union forces pressed deeper into Confederate territory, the system began to strain. Regiments were consolidated. Companies were reorganized. Clerks worked by candlelight, copying figures from one page to another, making decisions about men they had never met. Mistakes multiplied. One night, during a forced march through heavy rain, Samuel's company was split by confusion and terrain. Orders were misheard. A bridge was crossed twice. Men ended up assigned temporarily to the wrong units. By morning, no one was entirely sure who belonged where. An officer glanced at a list and pointed. "You, fall in there." Samuel did. That moment, unremarkable, undocumented, was the hinge on which the rest of his life turned. The unit he fell in with was not his. No one noticed. The next muster roll was completed hastily. Samuel's name was not included because the clerk did not know it existed. His original company listed him as detached temporarily. Temporary became permanent. Weeks passed. Samuel continued to fight, march, and follow orders. He did not question his place. He had been told where to stand. That was enough. The men around him changed. Some died. Others transferred. New faces appeared. No one asked Samuel his name. No one checked. By the time someone might have noticed, the army had moved on again, and the paperwork no longer matched the men in the ranks anyway. When the war finally collapsed under its own weight in 1865, units disbanded in confusion. Muster-out papers were prepared in bulk. Names were read aloud. Men stepped forward to receive discharge documents. Samuel's name was not called. He did not step forward. When the officers finished reading, they dismissed the remaining men as stragglers to be sorted later. Later never came. The army disbanded around him. The war ended. Samuel was still standing there. In the weeks that followed, he drifted. There were no instructions for men who were neither enlisted nor discharged. Rail passes were issued to those with papers. Rations were distributed to those on lists. Samuel had neither. He traded labor for food. He slept in barns, abandoned camps, and once in a courthouse hallway alongside other men who were also waiting for something that never arrived. Eventually, he removed the insignia from his coat, not because he wanted to leave the army, but because wearing it without orders felt wrong. He kept the coat. It was the only proof he had that the last 4 years had been real. He walked west, then north, then wherever work appeared. Railroads, mills, farms rebuilding after devastation. He told people he had been in the war. They nodded and did not ask for details. Everyone had been in the war in some way. Years passed. The country changed. Factories rose where fields had been. Towns grew loud and crowded. The war faded into speeches and parades and anniversaries. Samuel did not attend reunions. He was not invited. In the 1870 census, he was listed as a laborer, age 31, birthplace Ohio. The enumerator wrote the information down quickly, barely glancing at him. In the margin, the man misspelled his surname. No one corrected it. That version of Samuel existed on paper. The real one continued on. Pension laws expanded. Veterans were encouraged to apply. Widows and parents received benefits. Entire bureaucracies formed around verifying service. Samuel heard about the pensions from other laborers. "Didn't you fight?" one asked. "Yes," Samuel said. "Then you should apply." Samuel considered it, but when he thought about the forms, the questions, the proof, the signatures, he felt something tighten in his chest. He had no discharge papers. He had no company to list. His service, real as it had been, existed only in his memory and in ledgers that no longer matched reality. To apply would require explaining. Explaining would require being noticed. So he did not apply. The government, in turn, did not close his file. On paper, Samuel Isaiah Crowley remained enlisted. Time did what war could not. It wore him down quietly. His hands grew stiff, his back bent. The coat, carefully preserved, stayed folded in a trunk that followed him from place to place. He never married. He never settled anywhere long enough to feel ownership. Sometimes, when he passed recruitment posters for newer conflicts, he stopped and studied them. He wondered if the men signing those papers understood what they were agreeing to. In 1902, A young clerk in a federal records office noticed something odd, a file without an end. Samuel's enlistment record existed. His service term had expired decades earlier. There was no discharge, no death certificate, no pension record. According to the government, he was still serving. The clerk flagged it. The file moved slowly upward. Supervisors frowned. Committees convened. Clerks searched census records, local archives, hospital logs. They found him, living quietly in Indiana, working as a night watchman at a grain warehouse. When a letter arrived asking him to report to a local office, Samuel stared at it for a long time. The paper was official. The ink was firm. Someone had finally noticed. He went. The office was small. The clerk behind the desk looked confused when Samuel introduced himself. "You're still alive," the man said before he could stop himself. Samuel nodded. Forms were brought out. Questions were asked. Dates compared. The conclusion was simple and astonishing. Samuel Isaiah Crawley had never been discharged. He was, officially, still a soldier. The clerk cleared his throat. "Well, we'll fix that." Samuel waited for instructions. The clerk stamped a document and slid it across the desk. "Honorable discharge," he said, "effective today." Samuel looked at the paper. Today. Not 1865. Not the day the war ended. Today. After 40 years. He signed where indicated. When he stepped outside, the air felt no different. The street sounded the same, but something fundamental had shifted. For the first time since he had enlisted, the system recognized that he was finished. That night, he opened the trunk and unfolded the coat. He ran his fingers over the seams. He did not feel triumph. He felt tired. Samuel Isaiah Crawley died 3 years later. His death certificate listed his occupation as former soldier. His discharge paper was folded carefully and placed beside him. The government closed his file. The war finally ended. No monument bears his name. No history book mentions him. But for nearly half a century, the American Civil War did not release him. Not because he was brave, not because he was lost, but because, in a war fought as much on paper as on fields, a man became invisible, and invisibility, once recorded, can last a lifetime.